is Anthony Crucci.
Well, I just want to start by thanking Ed here, who's really done all the work to put this together. The center's only, we are where we are now because of people like Ed and others who have stepped up in our community and to really prioritize the services that we offer and the work we do. So we're incredibly grateful. And he's already spoken so eloquently about our work that I have a tough act to follow. But to give you a better sense of what we do at the center, all the services we offer there, including support groups, youth groups, senior services, substance abuse groups, and social programming. They're all services and programs meant to directed at needs related to health disparities within the LGBT community, such as mental health illness and addiction, that lead to things like homelessness and suicide and depression and isolation. And all of them, believe it or not, can be traced back to stigma and discrimination in our society that still exists. We know we're very close to achieving legal equality, but as we've seen with other minority groups in our country, legal equality is not the end. For the LGBT community and other groups, we know that it may be a long time until we're able to achieve lived equality or freedom from that stigma and discrimination from other groups within our society. Even in places like Fairfield County, it's not as common anymore now, but the center is often a beacon for people in need, people in crisis looking for resources and looking for help. Up until 2013, a lot of times when people in crisis may have called, there may or may not have been someone at the office at the time to pick up that phone. So we feel incredibly grateful to now have a full-time staff and a full-time social worker, as Ed mentioned, there to aid those people when they do contact us and connect them to the services and resources they need. So big thank you. I'm not going to talk any longer, but just a huge thank you to all of you for coming out tonight, and again to Ed for hosting this event. There's a sign-up sheet and information at the front of the room if you'd like to get our email list or find out more about the organization. A brief note, we are in the middle of our holiday appeal, and any money collected will go towards our new Client Emergency Assistance Financial Fund and our new Supporting Housing Project, as I mentioned. So thank you.
Before I introduce the performance tonight, I wanted to also thank Barry Katz for introducing me. Barry's is our resident scholar in gay literature. He runs our book club, and we're fairly well represented here tonight. But he introduced me to the Pikaysens. Thank you, Barry. They've been a wonderful addition to my life. There's a legend that has passed through generations of the Ysaye family. Eugene Ysaye is one of my favorite violinists and composers from Belgium who lived in the mid-1800s. His music is spectacular and it presaged a lot of the French Impressionistic music, and it's intensely emotive. And the legend that runs through his family is that they were woodcutters, and he had a viol, which was the predecessor instrument to the violin. And he was in the woods, and the fairy heard the viol and said, "Is that an instrument?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "It's a viol." And he said, "No." He said, "It doesn't quite make it." And he gave him the instructions on how to produce a violin. And he kissed the bow, and he said, with this, he said, you will be able to simulate the human voice. And in simulating the human voice, you'll be able to simulate that part of the human voice that speaks directly to the heart. And if you listen to the music that's going to be performed tonight, I can't but express how it gets directly to your heart. And it's the quintessential, I think for me at least, meaning of what a Western music tradition is all about. The performers tonight are the Pikaysens, their mother and son, Tatiana and Igor. They, very much like the story of Ysaye, they descend from a family of violinists. The Tatiana's dad is Victor Pikayzen, who is a renowned Russian violinist. I had the privilege of meeting him this summer, and the only word that I could use to ability of the profoundest sort. Tatiana is the direct descendant of that tradition. She's the pianist, and she has recorded a large part of the canon of traditional and classical, what we consider classical Western music: Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven, the sonatas, and she's won a number of prizes having to do with her interpretation of Chopin, the ballades, and it just goes on and on and on. With the bio is being circulated, but it's really amazing. And not to be outdone, Igor is the violinist, and that's her son. He is 27 years old, and if you read through the bio, he should really be about 54 at least. He has a number of awards which for me are unpronounceable, but that's my own naivety. They largely descend from the Eastern European tradition, but what I think we would all recognize is the other parts of his credentials: Juilliard, and he's now getting his doctorate in studies, violin studies, and it just goes on and on and on. And I can't, and I'm sure you'll agree after you hear it perform, I can't but imagine that his career trajectory is not going to be forever up. And so let me get them in. So, let's give him a round of applause.
I don't know which way to turn.
Igor is going to narrate some of it. He's going to explain some of the work that he's
Yeah, I'm going to provide some brief commentary. So first of all, thanks to everyone for coming, and of course thanks to Ed for organizing it. The first piece we will play today will be the Schumann Sonata in A minor. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the work of Robert Schumann, who was one of the greatest Romantic composers of the 19th century. He was first a tremendous virtuoso pianist, and then unfortunately had a hand injury. So he turned towards composing. He was also a writer. He was the main editor of the Neue Zeitschrift for Musik, which was the main music publication in Germany at the time. He championed the work of composers such as Chopin and Brahms, and he was prodigiously gifted, of course. At the same time, his is also a very tragic life. He always suffered from being a melancholic depressive, and towards the end of his life, he developed a sort of schizophrenia. He had periods of his life when he was afraid that people were out trying to poison him. He was afraid of metallic objects. So like many of the most talented people in our life, he was not completely sane. But at the same time, perhaps that's what allowed him to compose such genius music. He wrote the Sonata for Violin in 1851, 1852. It's just one of his last works. He died in 1856, and he was committed to a mental asylum in 1853. So it's actually interesting that towards the end of his life, he turned towards the violin. He wrote both his violin sonatas and the concerto, were some of his last works. It's in 3 movements. The first movement is mit leidenschaftlichen Ausdruck, which for those of you that have the misfortune of speaking German, means that you have to play it in the most passionate of expressions. The second movement, I would say, is a sort of respite from the first. And the third, you could interpret it in various ways. For me, it's a sort of turning towards the forest, as you could probably know. A lot of German composers study German literature and always have the images of forest and forest scenes as inspiration. So that's what I see in the last movement, but of course it's open to interpretation. Anyways, I hope you enjoy it.
Bravo! Bravo!
So that's the lead into the next composer. So the next composer that Tatiana will play will be and for those of you that don't know his work, Felix Mendelssohn was a brilliant pianist and composer, and conductor, and many things. Who, unlike a lot of his peers, he actually comes from a very wealthy family. He comes from a family of bankers, so he never had to use music as a tool for earning money, which is a nice luxury. He was very well educated, spoke 6 or 7 languages fluently, was also a writer, was a scholar. But when his parents discovered that he was so prodigiously gifted, they started investing in his music education. Also along the way, Felix Mendelssohn was Jewish, but he was baptized, and the name Bartholdy was added to his last name. So his career path would be easier. For a Jew in 19th century Germany, it would be tougher to make an international career. Mendelssohn is not only responsible for a lot of brilliant works and performances, he's also the one who rediscovered Bach, because at that time, at the beginning of the 19th century, Bach was largely forgotten. He brought back Bach. He is one of the first composers that started performing his masses, performing St. Matthew's Passion, for instance. At the same time, he also he didn't rediscover Beethoven because Beethoven was already popular, but he was greatly inspired by Beethoven. And I don't know if you want to talk more about the variations you're about to play. Okay, you're going to do the room? Okay, in that case, since I'm not in the room, I'm going to get out of the way. Okay, so Ronda
Ronda means repeating many times the same music material. Capricioso means like really capricious.
We're going to do some of the I guess quintessential violin pieces from the Chrysler book. You can explain about Chrysler and who he was. And,
Ed, did you study violin?
huh?
No, he studied the piano, that's it.
I studied. I studied piano.
You can make it.
And she said to me, she said, the way you play, the way you see, I said, maybe you should be an eye surgeon.
No, he was very good.
So now we move to Austria. Fritz Kreisler is one of the greatest violinists of the 20th century, along with Jascha Heifetz and David Oyster. And he's possibly the only great violinist of the 20th century who was not Jewish, as it happens. But still, he was very, very gifted, not only as a violinist, but also as a composer. And he composed a lot of what we call vignettes, which are short, very charming encore pieces. And since the 40s and the 50s, they've kind of become a staple of the violin repertoire. And this is one of them that's actually a bit lesser known than most of his vignettes. It's called Zigeuner Capriccio, which of course translates as Gypsy Caprice from German. So yeah, that's about it. And to finish off, how many of you have seen the Red Violin? It came out in the late 90s.
Of course.
Actually, I still haven't seen it in its entirety because when it came out, I was too young and my parents didn't allow me to watch the whole thing. And I don't think I've actually seen the whole thing ever since.
Oh, it's wonderful.
But the score was written, does anyone know who wrote the score to Red Violin? By any chance?
Not Joshua Bell, he played it.
You played it. It was actually written by John Corleone, who is actually at some point lived in Westport. And still grew up there, right? And he still is alive. He lives in New York. There is one scene from it which you might remember where Joshua Bell plays, an actor plays, but Joshua Bell provides the soundtrack. Red Violin Caprice, which is very virtuosic, which is exactly the same thing that I'll play for you right now. So.
Oh. Oh, man. close. Wow. You gonna make some closing comments? Wow, that was all wow.
Well,
That was woo.
Can we have a hand for Ed? Performance, and if we get them, maybe we'll do an encore. So,
Okay. Would you be
Of course.
are you taking requests?
Colton, whatever you want to play. Whatever you
Yes.
What would you enjoy?
Well,
make yourself happy.
Yeah.
Always.
Make someone happy.
Actually, well, we might as well finish with something Russian.
Obviously,
Obviously.
Dr. Swansea.
Yeah, we're close enough. So, that's after a few more of these. Tchaikovsky. Yeah. I'll take my violins.
Listen to your mom.
According to the program today, Handel only composed the Messiah a couple of hours of line on the.
No doubt.
I only started to
And it's actually the reason why we stand for the Hallelujah chorus is really probably not something Americans should stand for, because they were
Because George III stood
George
up.
the Third, right? And they were likening Christ to George the Third, so he stood up. He stood up to.
Interestingly, in the performance,
And that's when they say
soloist,
hallelujah.
stood up and sang the Hallelujah chorus.
The music was, I wasn't
We're ready.
Well, the king.
Well, after concerts, I always usually get the same 2 or 3 questions, and one of them is, who's your favorite composer?
Okay.
And to be perfectly honest, I hate that question because I hate quantifying my favorite composers or my favorite violinists or my favorite women. But at the same time, if I would have to choose one, it would probably have to be Pyotr Tchaikovsky, because personally, for me, he's my favorite composer. So we're gonna play Melody by Tchaikovsky.
Thank you.